Wall Street-backed corporations have proposed building North America's largest coal export terminal right here in Whatcom County. Coal is the leading contributor to global warming, the realities and consequences of which are becoming clearer to the people of the world every day. June broke more than 3,000 heat records across the U.S., while Saudi Arabia's Mecca witnessed the hottest downpour in Earth's history at 109 degrees. Humans need to change how we interact with the planet. There is a huge need for systematic global change, and although there are many individuals and organizations speaking out against the business-as-usual mentality, the fact remains that under our current economic system, corporate profit is still placed above all else. Our elected officials are not stepping up and advocating for the rights of the people or the environment. All of the politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, are currently allowing the Gateway Pacific Terminal project to go through. At least 9 of those who decide whether the project continues or not have received thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from the corporations pushing this project. We have with us today Colin Patrick, representative from Coal Free Bellingham, and the debate coach here at Western. Hopefully, Michael Point will be joining us. He's a former union officer and activist from Occupy Everett, and he's an independent candidate running for U.S. Congress District 2 against the incumbent Democrat Rick Larson. Kashama Sawant, she's a teacher at Seattle Central Community College, yes, and a member of Socialist Alternative, as well as a leading activist of Occupy Seattle. And she's running as a socialist for State House District 43. So this meeting is sponsored by Socialist Alternative. We're a national and international organization with branches in more than 40 countries around the world. To give you an idea of what we stand for, we support equal rights for all, money for education and jobs, not war, and environmental sustainability, just to name a few. So tonight, please listen to the speakers and then some announcements, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So please raise your hand and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you so that everybody has an equal chance to participate in the discussion. Would you like to start?
Sure. Like I mentioned, my name is Colin Patrick. I'm a representative, actually part of the steering committee for Coal Free Bellingham, the backers of the Bellingham Community Bill of Rights, which fundamentally seeks to solve the rights gap that exists between predatory corporations and the communities that seek to exploit them. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the ABCs of the coal train and what exactly is coming to our town. So first off, like she mentioned, it is the largest coal terminal in North America, 48 million tons of coal a year, 18 up to 20 trains going back and forth. These are cars that are 1.5 miles long, will not only absolutely increase the emergency response times, but they will lower our property values and they will increase our traffic. That should convince the right-wingers right there, I would think. However, there's a few other aspects. What has been proffered in support of this coal train and the Gateway Pacific Terminal is the idea of jobs. And they've adopted the moniker of the slogan of good jobs now. That's a lie in all intents and purposes. Not only will there not be jobs till 2016, that's something that even SSA Marine admits, but these jobs are under no guarantee that they're going to be going to individuals that come from Whatcom County. SSA Marine has a history of bringing in their own workers into the region and then taking them back out. There is no guarantee of reinvestment. Not to mention the amount of investment that has to be made on the side of the taxpayers. Roughly $114 million of the taxpayers' dollars will have to go to the construction of a new rail siding. You know what we get for that return on our investment? We don't get access to our waterfront, we don't get access to Boulevard Park, and we also have to have the added addition of increases to noise, increases in traffic, and like I've already mentioned, lower property values. This doesn't even begin to cover the aspects of public health, the threat and the threats to our water. There will be millions upon millions of gallons of bunker fuel running through barges the size of the Exxon Valdez, through the San Juans, through the Strait, and into our harbor. You know what happens if one of those spills? The economy and all aspects of the culture that make up Bellingham go away. We're already seeing oysters, because of acidity in the ocean, unable to form in the nascent stages, which was why we're having to ship baby oysters that grow up in New Zealand up here. We are losing an industry, and we are losing part of our culture. The aspect of oyster fishermen and the aspect of sustainable fishery in Bellingham is one of our history. It's not only just important for our economy, it's important for our culture and what makes us us. That's one of the reasons why this is so important, is because this not only threatens our environment, it threatens our economy, but it threatens the cultural standard that we've come to know in Bellingham, that of sustainability, not only in the environment, but a sustainable community. Now, you may ask yourself, why is this threat able to enter into Bellingham with such force? And the reason of that is that we are playing a rigged game. The system is rigged through lobbying, corporate nepotism, and enormous sums of money that allow corporations like BNSF, like SSA Marine, which is owned by Goldman Sachs, and Peabody, to go in and write their own rules and write their own exemptions. The BNSF, which just today joined the city's challenge, is one of the worst at this. They have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting for exemptions to positive track controls. Now, if you know what those are, that's a GPS system that stops trains from colliding. That would have been a system that would have been successful in stopping the '08 crash in LA, where 25 people died and over 300 people were injured. BNSF worked and paid and got that exemption. They also have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting anti-climate change initiatives. They were part of the Global Climate Coalition, a predecessor to the now defunct Heartland Institute, that supported anti-climate change scientists and other individuals to promote an agenda. They also were huge supporters of ALEC. Let's talk a little bit about SSA Marine. SSA Marine is an unbelievably anti-union company that is 100% against the goals and aspirations of organized labor. In 2002, they were the leading force behind the Pacific Maritime Association's lockout of the workers. They did not negotiate, they cut off negotiations, locked out the dock workers, and then went behind a back door that they paid for in the White House with corporate donations to George Bush and convinced the NRLB, or the No Labor Rights Board, to convince them to file a Taft-Hartley injunction forcing the workers back to work without a contract. That fundamentally undercut the ability for workers to be able to have the one tactic that they have, which is to strike, which is to say, no, we are the means of our own capital. We are the means of our own production, and that was taken away by SSA Marine. We cannot allow a company like that to come in. However, they've written the rules to allow themselves to do this. Think about the EIS process. This is the process that's meant to protect us. Here's the problem with that. The first of which is, not only is the EIS process fundamentally flawed for an innumerable amount of reasons, but the key one is the company that's doing the EIS process is one called CH2M Hill. Not only do they not have a public health background, but rather an engineering background, their former business director, a man named John Lovenberg, is now a vice president of environmental affairs at BNSF. This is the definition of corporate nepotism. If we expect any sort of system to work, we are fooling ourselves. The EIS statement has no chance of success. And the reason why it has no chance of success is because it has been written to give us no chance of success. Their core mission is not to say no to projects, but to find ways to allow projects to exist outside of enough activism to make it a problem. Which is why, even if there is some change, it's not going to say no to the terminal, it's not going to say no to the coal trains. They will make piecemeal suggestions that will still leave us subjected to this. How do we change this? We've always changed any sort of struggle that challenges oppression at the local level. We have always used individuals within a community banding together to challenge this type of predatory oppression from any sort of group that looks to discriminate and looks to oppress. From the women's suffrage movement, to labor rights movements, to modern food movements, they all began at levels of individual communities banding together to make a decision to overturn this. This is why it's so fundamentally important that you join us at Coal-Free Bellingham to fight against the Gateway Pacific Terminal and the rapid expansion of the coal trains. What we plan to propose with the Bellingham Community Bill of Rights is to establish not only rights for holistic ecosystems, so that the ecosystems that allow us to thrive, not only economically, not only environmentally, but also culturally, have the ability to exist and are not consistently under threat from exploitation. We also aim to strip corporate constitutional rights of those who would look to abuse us, primarily those who would look to ship coal, like Kaya mentioned, the #1 contributor to global climate change in the world, not to mention unbelievably damaging to our rivers and streams when it is gathered. The area in which Montana, in which they would be digging up all of this coal, is an unbelievably important salmon habitat. It is where a generational after generational of species of salmon have gone to spawn in there, and that is under threat as well. So the only way that we can fundamentally change this is to adopt a plan as a community to decide that our rights and the ability for us to self-determine our future is more important than the bottom line of a corporation. It's much more important than that bottom line, because for every cent that they make above the black, they have to take and gouge dollars out of our community to make that front end. They're willing to sacrifice areas to be able to make profits. Think about areas like Michigan that have been devastated by Nestle when they go in there and buy out water from under those individuals and leave them destitute because water is now so expensive that it's not possible to live there. Think about corporations that have gone into communities and have fracked the shit out of it and have actually turned it into potholes that have ruined their public air and their public water. For example, Fort Worth, Texas has worse air quality than Beijing because of hydraulic fracturing. Let that sit in for a minute. An area, a nation that has terrible environmental standards still has better air than one of our largest cities because of what we have done to it and what we have allowed to be done to it. Bellingham's too important for this, and their entire nation and the entire world is too important for something like that to happen. We have to make a challenge at the local level that can grow and expand and become a spearhead for this movement. Bellingham has a history of being a progressive beacon in a time of where progressives have been told to sit down and shut up. Not anymore. We're going to sit with a full-throated support and tell the world that we simply will not sit by and allow people to dictate our future to us. I urge all of you this coming Friday to join Coal-Free Bellingham at the Whatcom County Courthouse at 1:30. There, we will be hearing a decision by Judge Schneider over whether or not there will be a preliminary injunction as well as our slap claim over the hearing. We hope and we expect Judge Schneider to allow it on the ballot. We expect to not only have the voters of Bellingham to be able to go and have their naturally imbued right to decide their future, but we will also go to show them that it's too important to allow Bellingham to be subject to corporate abuse. The world is too important to be subject to corporate abuse. It's absolutely necessary that we be there Friday, 1:30, Whatcom County Courthouse, to show everyone that we will not be pushed around. We will be the ones who determine our own fate, regardless of what kind of corporation looks to exploit us. One of the things that you can do is, Rami has a whole bunch of these buttons. I urge you to collect, I urge you to get one, I urge you to get a bunch of them and give them to your friends and tell them to be there wearing them and show up at the courthouse. It's incredibly important that we have a big presence there on Friday to let everyone know how much this community cares about its future, how much it cares about its ability to have an economy that is green and unionized, how important it is to have an environment that is sustainable, and it's not only just sustainable for our generation, but for generations down the line. It is fundamentally important that we do this. So I urge you all to be there, and I urge you all to support us in the campaign, and I urge you all to vote for us in November when we get on this ballot this coming Friday.
So at this judicial hearing this Friday at 1:30, we're not allowed to bring signs. They want to keep the community quiet, but one thing we can wear is these buttons like he mentioned, so I'm passing these around. If you're free to come this Friday, please take a button. And like you said, it's good if we're all wearing these buttons anyway. Vote yes, Prop 2, coal-free Bellingham. So if you can donate to these later, we'll be taking donations later.
Thank you, Colin. And now we'll hear from Michael Flint.
Hi. Oh, sorry I'm a little late, but of course I parked in the completely opposite end, not knowing where I was. But, boy, you're just a treasure trove of knowledge over here. You said so much stuff that I knew was going on deep inside. You need the facts, because I've seen this before. The main thing that I'm basing my campaign on locally is coal train, and my hatred for Rick Larson. I'm going to be honest. But everything he said is right. We just can't allow them to steamroll over us. I'll be here whether I get into the primary or not. It's going to be an issue for me going forward. And it's going to be an issue for not just the people of Bellingham, but the people of Marysville, Edmonds, Mukilteo, everywhere these trains go as far as I'm concerned. We should make it that way. Bellingham being the only place where we're actually having people fighting the coal is not enough. We have to expand it to every place along the tracks that these trains go. Just to point to the what you were saying about the signs, pulling up the signs. I don't know if anybody's heard about it, but there's a strike going on with waste management, and it just started in Skagit County. And I've been going down to their picket lines the last couple of days to talk to the people there. And it's pretty much interesting to me that it seems to be a trend here of attacking unions or trying to get unions in here. So I'm kind of disappointed that the unions up here, Northwest Labor Council, was at that council meeting we had the other night to push for the coal train. It's kind of an unholy association as far as I'm concerned with them and the SSA Marine and the railroad. I've noticed, and what's going on with this waste management thing is, it appears to me what they're trying to do down there is break the union. They've already brought in a bunch of strike breakers, professional strike breakers, well, professionals in that they know how to run the trucks. They've got like 2 facilities have 60 apiece. The one in Marysville has 20 drivers there. And when I was down there today, the police had just gotten there. And they have had told people that they can't stop people, hold up people, more than 20 seconds now. They were holding them up for 3 minutes and then letting them go through the line. But now apparently our rights have been reduced to 20 seconds. And that's pretty disturbing to me. And I think we need not only to focus on the coal trains, but on the attacks on the unions. Because attacks on the unions is the next step. They destroy the environment, they destroy the unions, they destroy any chance we have of being represented. If they can just turn around and tell us you can only protest for 20 seconds, what kind of rights do we have? It's ridiculous. The coal trains, I'm hoping if I get through the primary, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the coal trains after the primary. And just try to go around to the people in my district and others, campaigning on this issue. And I'm hoping I'll get some people like you to come along with me and, get the facts out there, because a lot of people don't know the facts. They're not like Bellingham. Bellingham has a lot of progressive people, a lot of people who pay attention. Sadly, there's just too many people out there that don't pay attention. I actually went to my bank the other day to make a deposit, and one of the tellers said, "Oh, I got my ballot in the mail, and I saw your little, in the voter's guide, my little schmeal I had in there." And she goes, "Oh, it was pretty good. I really liked it." And she goes, "So that means if you win, you're going to be spending a lot of time in Olympia, right?" I'm running for Congress. It's kind of a sad state of affairs. It's kind of funny, but it's not really. People have gotten so disconnected. They got to leave. They got to hurry up and get home to watch Snooki on TV instead of paying attention to what's going on in the community, in this country, in the world. And while their backs are turned doing that, they're taking everything we have. They're taking away our environment. They're taking away our good jobs. They're taking away our rights, slowly but surely, and it has to stop. I just added, and you'll be happy to hear about this, Bob. I don't know if you've seen it, but I added a few statements on how I stand on the issues. Today I took on the issue of jobs, and I made reference to what's going on with waste management, and I also made reference about getting rights back to the community. The community, I want to enter legislation to reaffirm the rights of the community, decide what goes on in those communities. And I cited particularly Walmart, for instance. It should be up to the communities whether something like that comes into the community. If something's going to destroy the environment, like the coal trains, whatever we say is the bottom line. That's the end of the story. No fighting it in court, but we'll have a law that says that's the end of the story. I'm tired of the corporations just running everything with arrogance because they're above the law, because they don't get punished, they get fined. It's like if I went out and murdered somebody, and they said, oh, you murdered somebody. You go to court, they fine you $100. Pull it out of my pocket, gee, I'm sorry, and I take off. That's the equivalent of what's going on with corporations. Even if they're fined hundreds of millions of dollars, it's nothing to them. And they can literally kill people. They can kill people with a cold. Somebody with asthma dies because they live near the tracks. That's murder in my eyes. But they can get away with it. And likely they won't even get fined for it because they have the right to commerce. The right to commerce should not override the rights of the people in the community and the right to maintain your environment and keep it pure. And the rights of the world, the environment, should be represented by somebody, and it's going to have to be us. I just want to say that, well, first of all, I appreciate everybody's support here. This has been a wild ride for me. I'm sure it's been for you too. But I didn't know what to expect, and I got into the game late because I was teeter-tottering, should I or shouldn't I run? But one thing I've noticed in this whole campaign is that we really don't have a shot to get our story out there. Even when I go to forums, I don't know if you go to a forum, it's like, all right, we're going to ask you a question, you get the answer, you got 2 minutes. Blah, 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 blah. What can you say in 2 minutes? You try to do the best you can, but that doesn't really get your message out. You need time, you need something like this with a crowd to ask questions and to discuss what you're saying. It's sort of like speed dating. And our electoral process should not be speed dating. It's too important for that. And it's amazing. I mean, I don't know how I can't get past the primary. Because I don't know if you listened to Larson on the radio a couple of days ago. The guy doesn't say anything. I put it in somewhere, I wrote it down somewhere, that he uses "I will fight" or "I support you" as filler in a sentence in which he doesn't have anything to talk about. That's what he uses it for. When I say I fight, it's because it's in my job description. That's what I'm running for, to fight for the people, to represent them and not represent the corporations, because they have enough people representing them. They've bought them. They're called politicians, And I'm not going to be a politician. I'm going to be a representative. I'm going to fight the coal trains. I'm going to fight for jobs. I'm going to fight corporations not paying taxes. I'm going to fight everything that's detrimental to our communities and our environment. We got to get back to what America was supposed to be in this country, where people matter, where communities matter, where you have small businesses, not McDonald's in every damn city. Where profits go out of the community. We need to be self-sustainable, where the profits stay here, where we build a community the way we want to do it. We can't do that now. The oligarchy won't let us. It's sinful as far as I'm concerned, for you religious people out there. It's a sin, what's going on. And they should be in prison, as far as I'm concerned. The banks, the corporations, set laws that do not fine people for violating the law because they get some fancy lawyer who knows a back door to get into something. We do not fine them, we imprison them. Seriously, it has to end. You and I jaywalk, we could end up in prison if we give the cop a hard time. But they can just go through their lives, and jet around the world. They don't even live in America. They live in gated communities of the world where they can't see what's going on. They don't have to deal with the misery that they've created. And they have created misery. And they're trying to create more in Bellingham, in our country, in the ocean, in the skies. Coal is a dying form of energy. It should be a dying form of energy. We gotta start talking green, sustainable, not coal. And we gotta just drill it into people. We gotta talk to everybody who doesn't know. You know, we gotta make a stand. We gotta make a stand here as a community. We have to make a stand as the unions. Because without the unions, it's 100 times harder. And for the unions to survive without the community, it's 100 times harder. Since, I keep saying this, since 1946, the last great strike of the unions, where 800,000 people went out and got everything they wanted, the steel workers, the auto workers, General Electric. They've been fighting us ever since. And they just figured it out finally that they own the politicians. Let's get the politicians to give us money to leave the country. And that's what they did. They left the country because they didn't want to bother fighting us. They didn't want to fight the unions. They didn't want to pay a living wage. They didn't want to do the decent and right thing because they're not decent and they're always wrong. They're corporations, they're not people. The bottom line is profit. The community and the people who work for them don't even come into the discussion. There's something to be exploited. We are not to be exploited anymore. They are to be exploited. They are to be removed. Corporations should be given the rights they had back in the 1700s. They can be formed to do a project, and when that project is done, they should be dissolved. Big business should be the community grocery store, you know, or the hardware store. I remember going to the hardware store when I was a kid for my father to get a handful of penny nails. I love that. Where do you see that nowadays? You don't. You go to Lowe's, and there's a Lowe's everywhere. The hell with that. I want to go back to the way it was. It wasn't great for everybody, but we got to take the best parts of our childhood and make that the America that is there for our kids in the future. Take the best of the past, get rid of the worst of what we got now, and we can start building the America we need. And it starts by standing up. It starts by challenging the corporations and the government and the parties, the Republican and the Democratic parties. Even people like us. We want to run through the system, through the Democrats or the Republicans? No, we can't, because we're trying to do too much good. We won't toe the party line. If you don't toe the party line, you don't go anywhere. So even the people who are progressive in the party system cannot get to the point, most of the time, where they can actually run for office and achieve success. And even if they do, the party is always going to be there to hold them back, because the money is still going to the parties, the corporate money. We don't take the corporate money. We don't stand for the corporations. We stand for each other. I stand for everybody in here, and I expect you to stand for me, because it's the right thing to do, and it's what our America should be about. It starts with the coal trains. It starts with protecting the unions. I envision if this strike goes on, that I'm going to go and get the people in the community to come down on that picket line with their kids and start blocking them. All right? Let's see them come down there. What are they going to do? Are they going to pepper spray the kids? You know? Maybe they will. But what's that show them to be? You know, we're not doing any damage holding up a truck for 3 minutes. What damage is going to be done by that? That's not even, you know, harassing them or flattening their tires or whatever. Not that I would condone something like that. But it just goes to show them that right off the bat they want to show who's in charge, you know, and just to, you know, take the air out of the enthusiasm that the strikers have right now. To show them that, yeah, you're on strike, but we set the rules. Well, you know what? I'm tired of these damn bastards setting the rules. We are the people of this country. We should set the rules. And we should set an example. I'm here to say that I'm willing to set the example, and I'm hoping everybody here is willing to set the example too. That's what we're here for. We have to set an example. The people who brought us the unions, who brought us the weekends, who brought us the freedoms we have, we're setting an example because they didn't benefit from it. They just fought to get it. They sacrificed their lives. They sacrificed everything they had to get us the freedom that we have in this country. And it's going away again. And we need to stop it. So, that's it. That's all I got to say. All right, that's enough. Don't let it go to my head.
Now we'll hear from Sean.
Thank you, Kaya, and thanks to Socialist Alternative Bellingham for inviting me and us here. And also thanks so much to Colin and Mike, for those passionate speeches that really got me going. I want to go out there and protest. And I wanted to, I wanted to start by adding to some of the, brilliant litany of statistics that Colin had. It really struck me, as we were driving up from Seattle to Bellingham, every time I come, this is not the first time I've come here. I come here very often. It's sort of like a little vacation spot to get away from our political work in Seattle. But every time I come here, I'm struck anew by the stunning beauty of this place, and the whole idea of 18 trains running every day, making a 10-minute stop every hour, spewing out coal dust. That whole image just in my mind, it is just too much to bear. It can almost bring you to tears thinking of this beautiful environment being completely sort of destroyed by that. But as the earlier speakers have correctly pointed out, what lies at stake is not merely the beauty of this place, as important as it is. It's to do with our very lives, and not just locally, but globally. We are talking about coal here. This coal terminal, as Colin pointed out, is going to be the largest coal terminal in North America. It's going to transport 48 million tons of coal annually. And studies have shown that it's going to have a bigger impact than the Keystone XL pipeline. This is not, this is not a small thing we're talking about. What we have right here, in our backyards, is a global flashpoint for the global climate change issue. This is not a small thing. This is a huge issue, and it's sort of reflected by the fact that even Bill McKibben came and spoke here, and I know Kaya also already recited some of the statistics about this year. What is the extent of the global climate change crisis we are facing? June was the hottest month, and I really like the example of Mecca, having the hottest rainfall at 109 degrees. These changes that we're talking about, these are not child's play. These are going to have lasting impacts, not only for us, but for every generation to come. And I wanted to say something that you all probably already are aware of, that if this, first of all, this coal terminal is not a done deal. Look at how many obstacles the people who have been protesting against it have placed in its path. I'm sure the corporations who started doing this thought it would be just smooth sailing, and they probably did not expect this much opposition to it. But the problem is that even though it's not a done deal, it is extremely important for us to stay on target to prevent this from actually happening, not just make this a feel-good moment of protest, but actually stop it. Because if it goes through, then it is going to open up a slippery slope for the entire Northwest. Portland is going to be next, Vancouver. It's going to be a whole slew of coal terminals, because that whole railroad network is not going to work with just one. So this is just going to open up the path for that. But when I first started hearing about this down in Seattle, about this issue, and when we were talking to Rami and others about what was happening in Whatcom County, what struck me the most was not that this was happening. I'm an economist. It's corporations doing the things that they do is nothing new to me as an economist and as a Marxist and as an activist. I'm not surprised by those things. But what really was really not surprising, but just came as a pleasant fact to me, was that many of the protests, or even the attendance at the town halls and the packing of the city council meetings, these have been ranging anywhere from 400 to 1,000 people. Those are large. I don't know if you realize this, but your protests have been larger than the Occupy protests. This is the most amazing thing, that people haven't just, taken this lying down. People are saying, no, there's no way in hell that you're going to do this in our community. And so that brings me to my next point, which is, if we are living in a democracy, then how is it that these, these repeated protests, these big turnouts of, hundreds of people and even 1,000 people, how is it that that hasn't stopped this whole coal terminal dead in its tracks? And while we should be talking about the corporations, we should also be pointing out their allies in the government, the Democrats and the Republicans. I mean, as far as corporations are concerned, as you all know, the corporations that are involved in this are BNSF, Peabody Energy, Goldman Sachs, and SSA Marine, the most notorious one of them. These are corporations put together that are getting multiple billions of dollars of profits in every, annually. But they would not be able to do what they're doing so easily. Their agenda wouldn't so easily be achieved if they did not have loyal servants for them in Olympia and in Washington, D.C. And I think we need to name the culprits. This is not just some politician somewhere in the ether. This is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Let's not be afraid to say who it is. And I often don't mention the Republican Party. And one time recently I got asked, but aren't you against the Republican Party? And I just want to make it clear, I'm a socialist. Of course I'm against yeah, exactly. That's sort of needless to say. But the reason I don't mention the Republican Party often when I'm talking to a fellow progressive audience is because progressives and people on the left are clear about the Republican agenda. Republicans are sort of their tactic is to be more blatantly against ordinary people, more blatantly pro-business. Look at Mitt Romney. Look at what he's saying when he's out there in Europe. So progressives are clear about that. What they're not clear about often is the role of the Democratic Party, and that's where I think I can play a role, because I think the main thing we need to understand is not only that the Republican Party works against us, but we have to stop falling for this line that the Democratic Party is the party of the progressives. The reality, the unfortunate reality under capitalism in the United States is that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are very clearly and decisively serving the agenda of big business and the super wealthy. The only difference between them is the way they present themselves, their rhetoric, and also just the way they approach things. I mean, Republicans are more blatant about it. But as far as the coal terminal issue is concerned, I think we have to be very clear who the enemies are. It's not just the corporations. I mean, look at Rick Larson, your opponent.
I'd rather not.
I know, I know. But he recently hosted Craig Cole. Incidentally, his last name is Cole. He is the chief spokesperson for SSA Marine. Rick Larson is one of the beneficiaries of the corporations that are behind the coal terminal. But Rick Larson is far from an isolated instance. He's not the exception that proves the rule. He is the rule. You look at Kelly Linville, the mayor of this city. She has, her campaign got financial donations from the corporations. Patty Murray, U.S. Senator, also a Democrat. Her husband works for SSA Marine, and he has a retirement fund with them that is worth, $500,000, $500,000. How many of us in this room are ever going to have anything close to that? We are going to have a hard enough time having a decent standard of living in our young age. Forget when we are retired. They're reducing us to these crumbs, and look how they are living. And this is the Democratic Party we're talking about. So we need to be very clear how it is that the corporations are able to get away with this. It's not just through legal means. It's because there is this intricate nexus between Wall Street and Washington, between the industries and the executives and Olympia. That is how it works. And what is sacrificed in this whole process is the environmental sustainability. What is sacrificed is ordinary people's basic needs. And I wanted to talk about that as well for a little bit. Our campaign in Seattle, we're running for the State House from the 43rd District. This is a district that includes Seattle Central Community College and the University of Washington in Seattle. I myself, I'm an economics teacher at Seattle Central Community College. And those two state schools are they're two of the most important state schools. And state schools were public schools were set up with a mandate of providing good quality and affordable, but as a socialist I would say free, public education for everybody, which means including the poorest children in the community. Instead, what we're seeing is a really steady and systematic decimation of funding for public education. The University of Washington, in Seattle, between 2008 and next year will have seen 74% increase in their tuition. I mean, who do they think is going to be able to afford this kind of, who do they think is going to be able to afford $20,000 a year just to get an undergraduate degree? And then what is waiting for the youth after that? I mean, look at the way jobs have been decimated in this recession. We're facing a really urgent jobs crisis. And right here in Bellingham, Western Washington University used to be used to get two-thirds of its funding through, state funding, which is as it should be. And like I said, I personally would prefer 100% funding. But it has now completely gone the other way. Now two-thirds of the funding comes from tuition. I mean, this is, these are ordinary families, low-income, middle-class families paying for their children to get a college education, and that's where the college gets its funding from. And you have the Governor Gregoire, how many times have we heard her say, my hands are tied. I'm really wondering what's wrong with her hands. She keeps talking about her hands are tied. And as an economist and as an ordinary person, I can tell you that that's a complete lie. I mean, when they say that there's no money to fund education, what does that mean? We are living in one of the wealthiest states in the nation. This nation is the wealthiest country in the world and in the history of humanity. How can it make sense that we don't have enough money just to fund living wage jobs, quality public education, healthcare, housing, basic needs that human beings should get just by the virtue of being human beings, because that's the kind of, that's what it means to be living in a human society, So what we are missing in Olympia and in Washington is a voice to say that, look, we are not without means. The problem is that because we live in a capitalist society, and a deeply polarized society, there has been a massive distribution of wealth away from ordinary people, workers, the poor and low income, towards the super wealthy. I mean, all the wealth has flown from the bottom. Have you heard trickle down? Those of you who have taken Econ 101 have probably heard of trickle down. Let me tell you, there is no trickle down. It's a flow up. It's a gushing up of wealth from the bottom to absolutely stratospheric layers. I mean, the top 1/10 of 1% is seeing all the wealth consolidation that is ever made in this economy. So what we need to do overall, not only for this issue of coal terminal, is to say, enough, we reject this agenda of big business politics. What we need is for all the wealth that was created on the backs of ordinary people, ordinary workers, to come back to the communities. And we need to tax big corporations and the super wealthy, and their wealth in order to fund education and healthcare. I mean, I'll give you one very simple example, and we can talk more in the question and answer session. The state legislature, over the last several decades, has given away more than 500 tax exemptions to big corporations. Even if we reversed those, even if we ended those, that would bring in $6.5 billion annually into the state treasury. And that is more than enough to end all the cuts that have happened since 2008. I mean, so my point is that it's not like we don't have ideas for how to fix the problem. It's not like we lack economists or accountants or mathematicians to solve this problem. This is not an economic question. I mean, this is not a question of lacking skills or ideas. This is a problem. This is a political problem. There is nobody to advocate for these ideas, and we have to do it ourselves. I completely agree with Mike. We cannot look to the wealthy and the politicians that represent the wealthy to fight for us, because they're going to fight for themselves. We have to fight for ourselves, and we have to do that by helping to create the mass movements. We need another era of mass movements that will make that happen. And our campaign is running in that same spirit. We are activists first and last. We are not interested in, I personally am, and I'm a teacher and a researcher and an activist. I'm not interested in making a lucrative career for myself. Our campaign is being run as an example of what people should be doing in order to fight for their rights. We are hoping that this campaign will serve as a tool to help movements to grow and to expose the Democrats, and so that people can see that we don't have to accept politics on their terms. We don't have to accept politics on the terms of big business, the super wealthy, and the politicians that represent them. This is how politics is done. This is real politics where we are actually fighting for our rights. And I think the reason that electoral politics has to merge with mass movements is precisely related to what Colin just mentioned, which I liked, which is, we are playing a rigged game. So if we are just going to follow the agenda as we are handed down, we are never going to win. So we do need to do two things. One is to build a mass political alternative, a mass political party that will represent ordinary people. Your independent left candidates sitting in front of you are a beginning for that, but it cannot stay limited to just two people. I mean, this room should be filled with independent left candidates. How come there are just two people here? So we need independent left candidates to be running up and down the length of the state and challenging the 1% politics everywhere, not just in the state and in this country. And I wanted to close by going back to the coal terminal issue, and I don't want to go on for too long because both Mike and Colin have touched on the most important point related to the coal terminals, but since it is so important, I want you to reiterate it, which is that the only way that the corporations will succeed in this coal terminal is if they succeed in their divide and conquer strategy, where the environmental movement is here and the labor movement is here, and the labor movement is fighting for jobs, and the environmental movement is fighting to save Bellingham's beauty and air, without realizing that those two are actually going to go together. We will either get workers' rights and the environment together, or we will get neither. I mean, we have to understand that the enemy of environmental sustainability and the enemy of labor rights is the same. It's the same corporations, it's the 1%, and it's this capitalist system that works primarily, and I would say virtually only, in the interests of corporations. It is a profit-driven system, like you said, and so I think the environmental movement has to realize that, and labor leaders have to realize that. A really interesting example I wanted to give you as far as what the role of labor can be, which is that, I mentioned the Keystone XL pipeline. The Transit Workers Union and the Amalgamated Transit Union, nationally, both ATU and TWU, voted to oppose the Keystone XL pipeline, even though, it's the same story, it would create jobs and so on and so. So, that shows a very good example for what the kind of leadership that labor should be showing. It should join hands with the environmental movement and say, we reject coal in our air, and we reject these nickel and dime type of jobs. What we want is green jobs that are unionized and that will pay a living wage to our workers, because that's what we deserve. And we have created the wealth of this state, and we should demand it. And I think that a lot of other points will come up in the discussion, so I just wanted to stop there. Thank you.
I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone, thank the speakers, and thank everyone for being here. And I really want to second what Kshama said, which is, I think you hear excellent ideas here tonight about fighting the coal terminal, about fighting to change our society. And there's pretty clear, straightforward ideas that are being put forward, that we should have no coal terminal, but we should have other types of living wage jobs, union jobs. We should have an economy that works for workers and the environment. We should have full funding for schools. These ideas make sense, but there's the reason why this is not being implemented, as people explain, is that the politicians in power are being funded by the corporations, and the media also, by the way, is almost all entirely controlled by the corporations. Almost all the media outlets in this country are owned by 5 corporations. So we're running here 2 candidates who are willing to speak truth to power, to stand up to these guys. They're willing to fight the coal terminal. They're willing to fight these corporations, and we're not getting any money from corporations. Rick Larson, Patty Murray, Maria Kentwell, even Kelly Linville, they got money from these corporations that want to build this coal terminal. These guys did not.